Welcome to Screen Chat, live from the Media Hub on riotradio.ca. So,
we break down all things pop culture, from the hottest takes to the deepest cuts.
some things that are comic accurate shouldn't be on the TV.
From the latest Marvel blockbusters. I think we need an Amazing Spider-Man 3 before we did that.
That was very true.
To DC's Darkest Nights, and like, how do you get Christopher Nolan to do superheroes and make something that good? And it was just number one.
And to galaxies far, far away. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin, all these characters who are mainstream, they have to not just take things at face value.
We got you covered. Plus, you never know who may join us. Alicia put up the one, yeah.
It's us.
Tell us that.
Yeah, he literally did tell us.
These guys are trolling.
This is Screen Chat.
Pop culture, real talk.
And everything in between.
Live from the Media Hub
On riotradio.ca.
Hello, you, and welcome to the season premiere of Screen Chat, live from the Media Hub on riotradio.ca. I'm your host, Justin. Now, today we have the return of Screen Chat, season 3. The summer season is officially underway. I'm very excited because as one season starts, another season ends, and that season in particular is going to be You, Season 5. As always, Screen Chat is your show discussing all the latest Marvel movies, DC Comics, Star Wars adaptations, and much, much more. And like I said, today we have a lot to talk about as the world-renowned Netflix show You has finally come to an end. And I couldn't be, I guess, happier is the wrong word I would use. I would say I'm a little bittersweet, but for the way it ended, I'm definitely not upset, but I'm upset to see the show go. So we do have a lot to talk about today. I think how I'm kind of going to run it is I'm going to more or less just review the whole season, and as I go, just give my thoughts. It was a really good season. It was a nice christening end to the series as, season 5. You know, we got 50 episodes there. But yeah, I think we're going to break down season 5, and then I think at the end of it, I'll kind of just give a reflection on my thoughts on the whole show. And yeah, so before we fully get into it, thank you to Evan and Carson behind the scenes for teching today. We could not do the show without y'all. So, You Season 5. What's going on here? Well, the back end of Season 4 saw our main man, Joe Goldberg, Will Bettelheim, Jonathan Morley, I don't know. He has so many aliases that it's so hard to keep up by now. And I think from here, we could finally dive into his much more mature season as Joe Goldberg is back. And not just as someone else, but as Joe Goldberg, this time marrying Kate Lockwood, who was in the previous season. And yeah, Joe and Kate, they're back, and they're not just back anywhere, they're back in New York. So that's going to be the main topic of discussion today, as we do have a lot to discuss, because why is Joe back as Joe Goldberg in New York? Well, one of the main driving forces to that would be his son, Henry, who he did have with his previous wife, Love Quinn. And now Kate is stepping into that motherly role, and they're back in New York. So it's very interesting. Now, off rip, just setting the scene, I was very shocked when the trailer came out and it was revealed that we were going to go back to New York and Joe Goldberg was going to go back to using his name, as we see there standing at the subway station. I think that's wild to me. I will say off rip, the fact that they went with this direction and that Joe's name has now been cleared because I guess of his wife's power. You know, the Lockwoods they're a very powerful family. We know that from season 4. We know about the celebrity status that they do have in the UK, and now they're coming to the States with New York. So a lot to unpack today, because we do have a lot of new characters that we met along the way, including Kate's half-twin sisters, Reagan and Maddie. Now, these ladies here are played by Anna Camp, and she does a great job playing both of them. Now, I didn't realize that she had a pair of sisters, half sisters. But yeah, they're also heavily involved in the Lockwood business world. One comparison I made is that Maddie in this, or Reagan, reminds me a lot of Fallon from Dynasty, Elizabeth Gillies' take on Fallon. So I thought that was a nice little comparison there. Fallon, Reagan is more the business-minded, and Maddie's more of the outgoing party sister that no one really takes too seriously, which isn't really anyone's fault but her own. But that's okay. You know, if you have a lot of money, spend it how you will. It doesn't really matter to me. And we also we meet Teddy, who is their half-brother. Mr. Lockwood was doing a lot of sus stuff, as we know. So yeah, 3 different baby mamas, 4 different children later, and now we have a nice little established family cast for Kate there. So yeah, for Kate, we have some siblings, a new child, and we also have just her business, because we do know, like I said, she is heavily involved in Lockwood Corp. She's on the board. So as much as Kate has some new faces involved, so does Joe. And, it couldn't be a happily relationship without Joe wanting Yu. And this season's Yu takes the form of Bronte, who is an aspiring writer who we'll dive more into momentarily. But Bronte pretty much stumbles upon Mooney's by sneaking in. Seems like she's sleeping there. She's, I guess, rotating books as well. So one thing that Joe really does respect about Bronte is that she's a bookworm. She just loves to read, loves to write, and doesn't damage the books, respects the books, takes care of the books. And I thought it was pretty cool that Joe saw that. Well, no, this isn't cool, by the way. This is just like I could respect the character development, but saw that and offered her a job at Mooney's. So yeah, Mooney's is back. It's owned by the Lockwoods, and Joe's able to get his bookstore back. I'm only laughing because this is just so not ironic, but everything comes full circle, right? And we started off with Mooney's, and now we're going to be ending there too in season 5. And I thought Bronte being the Yu of this season, I think, hot take, she was probably the best one. In terms of what the role is, I really enjoyed seeing Guinevere back. I did like Marianne as well, and obviously Kate recently, and obviously there was a Delilah in there as well. But for what Joe wanted, it's crazy to say, but yeah, Bronte kind of fit that, despite this guy being married for 3 years, raising a son with his new wife. So yeah, Bronte is the new Yu, and that kind of goes into the next part of this. So his mistakes, and Joe's first mistake of the season was dabbling into Yu, and Yu in this case being Bronte, like I mentioned. Bronte says from the start, I don't want to be your trope. I don't want to be the other woman. I don't want to be the affair lady. And Joe makes a couple moves, it doesn't work out, and then eventually they just both fold. And I'm like, fair enough, it was bound to happen. Joe's at a point where he kind of feels like his wife doesn't love the real him, and that's this, I guess, romantic fantasy kind of writer. And it's very sadistic too, because it gets gory, as you know. If you've seen the show, you know that Joe isn't just your average Joe, no pun intended. And he despises Kate for not accepting that side of him. And he turns to Bronte, and Bronte loves the I guess, stories and the poems that Joe's writing about her. Even though it's very graphic, she loved it. And eventually, once they come to that conclusion that they're both on the same page, all bets are loose. Now, I will say that as much as I love Joe, this was, for him personally, probably his worst season. He makes a lot of mistakes along the way that Joe Goldberg wouldn't make, but that's what really shows, I guess, that shows how close himself and Bronte were, that Joe could be so vulnerable and not think 3 steps ahead all the time. And you see that when he locks up the wrong twin sister, because eventually he's at a point where, Reagan is onto him, and Reagan suspects that Joe has a bad past, discovers that it was him that killed Reese Montrose in season 4, and that Kate covered up, and threatens to put Joe in jail, threatens to get Henry taken away. It's a whole thing, and he does it. He locks up Reagan, but to his surprise, it was Maddie. And now this is where stuff kind of starts hitting the fan. We're in a situation where if Joe lets Maddie go, despite Maddie loving Joe, calling him her boo-boo, it's not going to go well. Maddie's going to run for the hills, contact the police, tell Kate, tell Reagan, all the whole 9 yards. So Joe has to put on his master manipulation phase. And one thing leads to another, and now both twins are locked up. Now, this is the really cool, sadistic side of Joe that I like. And don't worry, I'm not, DC's version of Joe. I'm not a manipulator like this, but I really could appreciate what he's able to do with these two in the cage. I have twin siblings, my little brothers, they're twins, and I never really like comparing the two. And when people ask me, who's funnier, who's better at soccer, who's this? Nah, I don't like doing that. They're each their own person. It's not like they're clones of each other. They're each their own. Maddie can't really deal with the fact that everybody thinks that Reagan is better than her. Reagan was the smarter one. More guys wanted Reagan. Reagan takes up the business, and Reagan is actually dating this guy Harrison, who Maddie is in love with, and Reagan knows that and still decided to go with him. So once Joe kidnaps Reagan, leaves her in there unconscious, Maddie's like, okay, you know what? It's cool. Reagan, you're up. Let's get out of here together, because Joe thinks I could be you. And Reagan just starts dying of laughter and is like, that's ridiculous. You can never be me. He wants to do this whole plan to get Reagan killed, and then Maddie could pose as Reagan and help him as he goes. But the sheer, I guess, realization that Maddie has here is it's like really well played out by Anna Camp, because obviously, you know, Anna Camp is acting against herself in these scenes. But to see one side of her be so sadistic and then see the other side be so vulnerable, it was really good acting. You know, she was in Pitch Perfect as well, so she has a lot of good roles. But this is probably my favorite role that Anna Camp has played, which is both Maddie and Reagan simultaneously. And now Maddie's posed with the question, you know, do I kill my sister for Joe? And in that moment, her sister was the biggest monster, the biggest hater, the one that didn't respect her, didn't love her, didn't think anything of her. And she does it. She kills her sister. Obviously, we can't show it, but yeah, she kills her sister in the cage. Joe comes back and is like, yeah, let's do it. So that was Joe's biggest mistake in the early on, because now Reagan is dead. And I don't think Reagan was supposed to die in this kind of setting. I think he had other plans in mind. And now we're in a position where Reagan is dead, so Maddie has to pose as Reagan. And it's so crazy. Like, I felt so bad for the character of Maddie because she's not her sister. And she had to, like, look herself in the mirror, impersonate her. And, like, no one was buying it, unfortunately. Nobody was. So maybe the sister was right by saying, you can never be me. And I think, unfortunately, that was her eventual demise. But we'll get to that eventually. Now, his next mistakes that he kept making was taking the bait. And what do I mean by that? Well, he wanted to be Bronte's White Knight. And from what it looks like here, you know, this is a guy that's pressing Bronte at Mooney's, and Bronte has informed Joe that this is her ex-boyfriend, Clayton. And Clayton's very rude and arrogant, says some, like, you know, very inappropriate stuff that I'm not going to repeat. And next thing we know, he's pressing her, touching up on her, like, you know, like, oh, like, what are you doing? And so Joe has to step in, and he again takes the bait, is the White Knight, and he's pushing Clayton up against the bookshelves there. And it's like one of those ones where, Joe, please stop taking the bait. Like, Bronte keeps telling you, yo, like, I'm not yours to save. You are married. But, you know, he keeps doing it. And I feel like him trying to be this White Knight, it's really cool, and I could appreciate it. But, like, when you have a wife and kids, this isn't it. And unfortunately, that's what I'm kind of going to segue to now. His next greatest mistake was his marriage. His marriage fell apart, and he didn't really do anything to save the marriage. Instead of, like, trying to be better for Kate, saying he's, you know, going to do X, Y, and Z, they have one disagreement about Joe's killing sprees and his history, and it causes Kate to look into him because Joe's not being truthful. And in turn, Joe starts having this affair. And it's unfortunate because I really like the character dynamic of both Kate and Joe in both seasons 4 and 5. I thought they were both equally sadistic, but in different ways. And I feel like it was cool to see. Now, granted, like I said, Kate doesn't know everything about Joe. Kate knows that Joe killed Reese Montrose, and that Kate had to frame Joe's former student Nadia for the murder. And that's how Joe is free, and that's how Joe is back in New York. And once X, Y, and Z starts playing out, Kate's like, wow, who did I marry? Because I didn't know he did that. I didn't know he could do that. I didn't know he loved killing so much. And I think it comes with, I guess, Joe not being truthful to his wife. And unfortunately, that eventually does lead to their eventual divorce. And it leads to Joe doing what he, you know, does the best, what he loves, killing. He is in another situation where he's trying to be the White Knight to Bronte, and he ends up killing Bronte's ex-boyfriend Clayton. And it was pretty crazy, I'm not gonna lie. You know, I don't want to obviously play the clip, but just to really elaborate on this quickly, Bronte and Clayton are having an argument because Bronte leaves town, goes off with Clayton, and Joe can't accept it. He's like, why would you leave me? Why would you build this all up? Why would I destroy my marriage for you if you're just going to leave? Then Bronte calls him out of nowhere, says, hey, I'm like, okay, don't worry about me. Joe calls the number back, does his twisted stuff, and finds out where they are. So they're at a beach house, and Joe sneaks in and sees Clayton attack Bronte. And this was a really cool moment for Joe because valiantly is the word I'll use, goes, confronts Clayton, and as they're like having a scuffle, a dirty Tilly, you already know the vibes, he ends up looking over at Bronte, and then like the spark comes, and he just like, boom, just like slams his head against the mantle, and he kills him, for Bronte. But as I was saying, what was Joe doing? He was taking the bait, because in walks in the rest of their crew, and little do we know, this was all a setup that Bronte was actually in on. And it was like the twist of the season was that Bronte, who we know his real name is Louise, was working with Clayton, and then the other two behind them being Phoenix and Monique. And they were trying to prove that Joe Goldberg is a murderer. What? Like, what? Like, I did not see that coming at all. Bronte was in on it the whole time because they think that Joe killed Guinevere Beck, which we know is true. And the twist of it all is that Dr. Nikki, who Joe had framed, is the father of Clayton. So Clayton was just trying to get some redemption for his father, get revenge, get justice. And in turn, Joe kills him. And Bronte was in on it the whole time. And this is where stuff kind of goes downhill for Joe. Or so we think, because now Joe is not accepted by anybody. He's on the front page. Everyone in New York is looking at him differently. And when the police come to talk to the team, Monique and Phoenix, I almost called her Arizona, but Monique and Phoenix say, look, man, we've been researching Joe for years now. He killed Guinevere Beck, and he just killed our friend. We have proof. It's done. But then Bronte comes in, and this is why, to me, she's the best version of you, at least up until this point, and tells the cops, look, man, Clayton, he was attacking me. That's all Joe saw. Joe came to my rescue and did it out of self-defense. So nothing happens to him. He gets off, and Monique and Phoenix just make it their mission to try and put this guy behind bars. They go on TikTok live, as we saw there. So they do their own TikTok lives. They do their own stories on Instagram and social media. And people start coming forward. We see Guinevere Beck's brother say, look, man, if it was this guy that killed my sister, and then has a picture of her, it's like, you took this away from me. We see Love Quinn's mother. She makes a TikTok and is like, I haven't seen my grandson in years. Joe Goldberg killed my son and my daughter. But we also see other people come to Joe's defense, such as his old worker, who says, look, man, I'm always on the victim's side. But Joe was a pretty cool dude, and Joe would not do that. And he's like, yo, I appreciate that. And then we see, and this was one of, not my favorite parts because I agree, but one of my favorite parts of the series because it was real. It was down to earth. It was true. We see a lot of toxic masculine men, as they're, worded, on TikTok coming to the defense of Joe. They said, look, man, this girl, I was going to call her Reagan. This girl, Bronte, Louise, whatever you want to call her, because she's going by an alias. We don't know anything about her. Like, this is what the TikTokers are saying. She wanted Joe to kill Clayton. And now that Joe's done that, they want to frame him. Nah, man, get this girl out of here. That's what they were saying. And it was pretty cool because in today's society, that's like a big part of TikTok. We see a lot of just a name drop. And we see Andrew Tate on TikTok and his, I guess, influence, if you will, on people. And it was a lot of people that were like Andrew Tate that were making these videos. And I was like, you know what? That's pretty cool. I like that. It takes a real approach on the whole social media side of it, and what would happen in real life if this happened. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I feel like him taking this bait throughout is what cost him, because Bronte kept saying throughout the whole series, look, I'm not yours to save, I don't want to be the trope. And he just kept taking the bait, and Bronte eventually is revealed to be a catfish. But like I mentioned, she does come to the realization that Joe Goldberg isn't a bad guy. He was saving me. He was doing what anyone should do in that situation. So it's a very interesting take, because this season was only 10 episodes. And I feel like the adrenaline rush was there. I was not expecting this. Apparently people online were. I wasn't. I was thrown for such a loop. And now in turn, Joe is isolated from I guess the Lockwoods, his wife, the public, but in turn, he abandons his son. And I think that's his biggest mistake of the season, was being in a position where now your son, because at this point in time, is now halfway across the world in London because Kate flees to London, and you just don't have your kid anymore, man. And I felt bad. You know, we saw a cool cameo from OG Will, and he's kind of helping out Joe to kind of get back on track, try and find the son. And eventually Joe comes up with the ploy and frames Harrison for the murder of Reagan Lockwood. So in a matter of an instant, both Harrison and Maddie go to prison, and Kate has to fly back from London with Henry to see it out. So this is where kind of the climax of the show happens, because now that they're all back in New York, you know, stuff could finally go on. So while I guess Kate was in London, she had to make one thing right, and she busts Nadia out of jail. We do know that Kate in turn put Nadia in jail, comes back, says to her, look, you know, I made some mistakes. I'll never ask you for your forgiveness because I don't deserve it, but help me take down Joe Goldberg. Just help me do it. And she's like, you know what? Let's do it. We can't wait years. We can't wait like months. We just got to do this right now. And they decide that if to take down Joe Goldberg, they have to kill Joe Goldberg. They have to go back to where it all started, and they have to go back to Mooney's basement. And they don't go alone, as the bigger twist, in my opinion, of the series is that we see the return of Marianne, who I thought was dead. We all thought she was dead, and it turns out she's alive. And she comes back with the gang, and they're all agreeing that, you know, they're gonna kill Joe. But the thing that they needed, though, is they needed the confession. They needed Joe to say, look, I framed Harrison and Maddie. I killed Reagan Lockwood. And once they got that, they were going to kill him. Unfortunately, Marianne says that. That was never supposed to be said, because Kate says, look, if you give us what we need, we'll let you run free. But in reality, they were going to get the confession, then kill him. So to beat Joe Goldberg, you have to be Joe Goldberg. And I thought it was a really cool kind of redemption arc for the girls. However, you know, to Joe's credit, he is always the smartest person in the room. So it is revealed that Joe has sewn a key. It's like on this part of his like wrist, and he breaks out of the cage. So once Marianne and Nadia leave, because Kate says to them, look, I'm going to go down and kill Joe, she goes down to kill Joe, and she ends up fighting him, because instead of just putting I guess they wanted to put carbon monoxide in the cage. Instead of doing that, they end up having a fight. I'm not going to show the fight clips because there's a lot of blood. This is just a previous scene from the season, and they're just having at it. But in turn of having at it, someone pulls up to have their redemption, and it is Maddie, because Harrison lies and said it was all him, so they free Maddie from jail. And as Joe goes to escape, Maddie locks him in the basement and says, yeah, I just got to burn the place down. Kate's downstairs unconscious, Joe's locked in there, and Maddie gets her redemption and just starts burning the place. And it was amazing. I loved it. I was like, yes, go Anna Camp, let's go. Now, obviously, you know, the show couldn't end there. So with plot armor, Joe was able to escape because Bronte ends up breaking in and saving him. And they agree that they're going to leave this town together and escape. Now, one thing that I will highlight here is that it was very much so, like, to me, that Kate was dead. So Kate gets hit in the head with an axe and shot. But before she goes, Joe thinks he's also going to go. So Kate's like, listen, you know, like, how did you kill your ex-wife? And he just confesses to what he did to Love Quinn. And Kate essentially goes, thank you. And it's revealed that she recorded the whole thing on her phone, sends it to Nadia, and just places the phone on the ground, and is just laying back like that to die. So it was pretty cool. I was like, look, that's it. They both died. And then, like I said, Bronte comes in and saves the day. And yeah, Kate's dead, unfortunately. So I was very disappointed that Kate died, because I love Kate, and I love the actress that played her. She did really well. So yeah, we eventually are now at the climax of the show. It's over. Louise and Joe are able to escape. And it all takes a weird turn, though, because to start the finale, Louise is now essentially in a position of, I now need to kill you. But before I kill you, I need to find answers. How did you kill Guinevere Beck? And it's like, oh my God, Louise, like, I get it. Get your closure. But if you think you could kill Joe Goldberg in an instant, then why wouldn't you? And this eventually leads to them, in this scene, they go to a lake house, sorry, and Louise is like, yeah, I'm going to die. It's over. He took me here to kill me. So she is one step ahead, brings the gun, and they have this whole scene right here. And what really got to me during this scene was that as she's about to essentially shoot Joe, his phone rings. And he's like, please, 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 let me answer it. It could be my son. He picks up the phone. It's Will, like OG Will. And he's like, look, man, I can connect with your son right now. And he talks to Henry. And he's like, Henry, like, how's it going? And he goes, Dad, did you kill Aunt Reagan? He's like, no, I didn't. And he's like, well, like, Uncle Teddy said you did. And in one of like the most heartbreaking moments of the show, Henry says to Joe, look, remember all those nights that you told me that there were no monsters in my room? Well, you lied. You were the monster. And like hangs up the phone. And I'm not gonna lie, man, that hit. I started kind of shedding a tear. And then after that, he just crashes out, as anyone would in that situation, right? Like he just crashes out. And I felt terrible, even though Joe, like, I didn't feel bad for necessarily Joe, the serial killer. I felt bad for Joe, the dad. And like, it just hit so hard seeing that scene. Then shortly after that, and I can't show any clips because it's way too gory, but these two just have like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith like fight. It just like, I don't know what necessarily happened, but either Joe shot Bronte or Bronte shot herself. And now they're just fighting, and then Joe and Bronte run for the woods, run for the hills. And it leads to this whole thing, and eventually they have this big monologue. It was a really cool scene. Like I said, I would show it, but there's too much blood. It's too graphic. And eventually the cops come because Bronte is able to call 911. And yeah, the cops come, and it looks like everybody gets their happy ending. So before we get to, I guess, like the ending and reflection, what a season, man. Like, what a roller coaster of a season. For it to end off with that being the climax, was not expecting it. I fully thought that these two were going to go off, be endgame, get their castle. But no, Bronte stuck it out in the end. She was like, you know what? I've known all about this guy for the past 3 years. I got to put down my delusions. He killed Beck. That is why we're here. Beck was my friend because they have history together. And it's like, I could respect that she stuck it out. She didn't do anything stupid. She didn't fall into the delusions, even though she did initially. She eventually came back out, had a plan, and I'm just gonna say this now. There is somebody at the door. But anyways, going back to this, yeah, I really enjoyed that Bronte, for lack of better words, stuck to her roots, and it just led to justice. Shout out Anakin Skywalker. So yeah, going now to the ending of You Season 5, there's a lot of happy endings, as there should have been. We saw the return of Kate. So Kate is actually alive, and I didn't know that, actually. I thought Kate died in the smoke, like I said, and it turns out that Kate is back with Henry. So it was pretty cool because I didn't know Henry was going to get the happy ending because Joe just kept saying, you know what? I can't abandon my family the way my family abandoned me. So I thought Henry wasn't going to get the happy ending. It was unfortunate, but like I said, Kate survived. Kate has, if you see on her left arm there, well, it's her right arm, but on the left side, she's really badly scarred. And Henry acknowledges that. And, there is a really cool scene where Henry's like lying down next to his mother, just like seeing her from the back. And he just keeps looking at the scars, and it hits. And, it was really unfortunate. But yeah, at least Henry gets somewhat of a happy ending, and he's left with one of his parents. The next happy ending that I really enjoyed to see this was Maddie and Harrison. So Maddie and Harrison, they end up getting together. They were the one true pairing the whole time. And they're raising Gretchen, who was, I guess, it was Reagan's child, but it gets revealed that it was really Maddie's kid the whole time. And now they're engaged to be married and are expecting twins. So yeah, I thought that was amazing. I was really happy for Maddie specifically. She was probably my favorite character in the whole season. That wasn't Joe Goldberg, honestly. And it doesn't just stop there, because Louise, Bronte just dropped in the name, just going by Louise. She stands tall, she's back, and she's writing again. And it was amazing because like this character was so damaged and misunderstood all she wanted was to be something. But she didn't know if that was Bronte, didn't know if it was Louise, didn't know if it was both. And after taking down Joe Goldberg, she's back as Louise. And I honestly, again, I thought it was amazing. And one thing that this show really, or this season symbolized, is that it all comes back to one person, and that is Guinevere Beck. The one that Joe couldn't outrun, the one that he couldn't escape. And like, it's so prevalent in this season to where it kind of made me emotional, I'm not gonna lie. Like, it didn't matter that Marianne was back, didn't matter that Nadia was out of jail, didn't matter that Kate did X, Y, and Z. It just mattered that the ghost of Beck still haunted him in the form of Bronte and the revenge plot and Dr. Nikki's plot. And like, it's an emotional goodbye, man. Like, when you watch season 1 to 2, you don't really think that Beck matters that much. You know, she's mentioned here and there. And then like Candace comes back to try and prove that Beck was killed by Joe, and like, it just keeps snowballing, but Joe gets out of it. He relocates, renames himself. But as much as I loved Joe, you know, season 1 starts with New York and Guinevere Beck, and season ends the same. Season 5 ends the same, sorry. So it was very symbolic, and I loved that. You know, one thing about shows, I feel like when they drag on, it just gets too repetitive, it gets too boring. And I thought season 4 was that. It was a stupid take, at least to me, on the show, but then season 5 picks up where it leaves off, and it just redeems it. And I was really happy that it was able to have a nice closing moment with all the characters getting justice and they were free. And that leaves us with Joe, the main man himself. He was finally defeated. He was in jail. There was no release. There was no will he escape prison. He was done. He was in jail. And in one of the best scenes to close a series I've ever seen, Joe receives fan mail from various women saying, "We love you. We want you to do what you did to those women to us." And it's very sadistic. And it just makes you think, you know, who's really the bad guy? Is it the killer or the person that loves to see the killer kill? And he says one of the best lines that has just been sitting with me for the past like 14 hours now, because I finished watching this about midnight. He says, "Maybe we should fix what's broken in us. Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe the problem is you." And just closes with that. And I was like, oh my God, yes. Because I loved this show. I loved it. I thought it was amazing. I thought seasons 1 to 5 were great. But am I worse for that? Like, am I the problem? Because as much as Joe's the problem, I love this guy. I love seeing what he's going to do next. I love seeing the thought process, the killing process, the murder process. And like, I think if we can, just putting this one on full screen, like just seeing these characters come back to haunt this guy. What goes around always comes around. And it's like, who's the real villain? And it's right there in front of you. And it's not Joe Goldberg. It's that word that's right below him. It's you. You're the villain of the story. You're the one that wanted to see these women get tormented and see these people die. And it's all you. And I just thought that ending was phenomenal. Like, I was watching that last night and I was like, wow, out of all the endings to a show, I can't think of one that gave me such closure. There was no tease to a spin-off series. There was no escape from prison. There was no Joe's gonna get out. There was no questions that we won't have answers for years. He was done. He was defeated. But as much as he was defeated, so were you. And I think that was just amazing. For a 5-season, 50-episode Netflix show, to me, it doesn't get better. I know that might be a hot take, but you, to me, is the best Netflix show. That was kind of a tongue twister, but that's number one. And the reason why it is because, again, the villain of the story is not Joe. It is you. It is you, the audience. And that was just one of the best lines for me from the show. And I think as a really big fan, and again, I'm the problem, but as a really big fan, I was insanely satisfied with the ending of You. And before we close off, let's see what other people thought. So I had a couple of friends that watched this as well, and I put out a poll on my Instagram, and I was just like, you know what? write your thoughts on it. I'll read it, just to get some fan engagement. So starting off with my boy Cub, he says just 2 simple words: free Joe. And I'm like, Cub, I don't think we could free up the Mandem. I think he should be locked up for this one, but we're gonna leave it at that. Zenon, he says, last episode is genuinely a fantastic finale. I totally agree. I thought the finale of You was peak You. It was 10 out of 10. And like I said, the symbolism, the messages, it was all there. Alicia, shout out Alicia, if you know, watch the Justin Air. She says, Bronte should have offed him when she had the chance, but she took too long and goofed. Yo, like, that's fair. But like, hey, in the end, we got the justice that we needed. And finally, close it off, my twin Kayla, my curly-headed twin, she loved the show. And like, we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, and I said to her, I'm gonna do an episode and I'll put up a poll and I hope you leave your thoughts. Well, she needed not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 responses. So thank you for that, twin. She says, the perfect ending to a crazy series that took us all on an emotional roller coaster ride. All the twists from Bronte not being who she says she is, to the cameos, which were a great touch, and how everything related back to Beck. There was no cliffhanger to all my questions, and all my questions were answered, and it was a great way to put an end to the season. It really surpassed my expectations. Yeah, we're on the same wavelength with that one, Kayla. I texted you about it this morning. Yeah, it was just amazing. And like, to me, like I said, I love that there were no loose ends. We got the closure that we needed. Whether we wanted the closure to be that we were the real bad guys is another question. But personally, if You is going to end with me thinking that I'm really the villain of the story, I'm okay with that. Am I the Joe Goldberg of my life? Absolutely not. There's no way. But again, who's worse, the killer or the person that loves to see the killer kill? And I think Joe Goldberg really hits it on the head at the end by says, maybe it wasn't me, maybe it's you. So that's going to do it for us today on Screen Chat. I love discussing that show, and it is bittersweet that it is done. But yeah, I was happy to be back. This was the the official season 3 summer season premiere. And yeah, just love being back. I'm going to hopefully do some more banger episodes. I really want to make the summer season count. And yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you again for behind the scenes to Evan and Carson for teching. We could not do the show without y'all. And yeah, I've been Justin, and this has been Screen Chat live from the Media Hub on RiotRadio.ca.